Anyway, good afternoon, everybody, or good afternoon, or good evening, or morning, or wherever you happen to be. So, my name is Laurie Beagle. I'm we'll move on to the next slide. I'm managing director at Forums International. This is our second Ukraine event. First one last week. That week before last was a great success. And I think we said at the time there is no shortage of things to talk about in respect of Ukraine. Today we had the UK government, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, did his spring statement lunchtime, saying about spending and etc. And he referred to Ukraine and said that we're going to be in for a tough time going forward, especially with the impact on things like grain and fuel, etc. And in fact, today he's just reduced the duty on fuel, which is great. So 5p a litre. So that's, I'm not quite sure it's going to make too much of an effect, but it will make some effect. But not just in people's cars, but also deliveries, and etc. etc. So I think. When we started this, we thought, well, how important will these sessions be? How often do we need to do them? And the feedback we got certainly from the first one was that, yes, we should really look at doing these on a regular basis. So it's every other week almost. We're going to be doing these with the caveat that we will hold them more regularly if events actually dictate. So we'll be keeping an eye on the news. So thank you for coming. We had a lot of people booked. We've still got a lot more people expected. I shall go and do a bit of chasing up while when I hand over to Darren. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to a good session. Thank you.
Okay, and yeah, just to add to that, we are recording these sessions. Ordinarily for our forums, we don't make the recordings public, but we've made the decision that a lot of the stuff we're discussing, we would like to spread the net as widely as possible. Having said that, we are required to edit out, because of company policy, Marsh's segment. So those of you who made it here today, you've got the exclusive, and those that haven't made it are going to miss out. Never mind. But yes, we are recording, so don't let that stop you from interacting. If anything overly controversial gets said, then I'll be doing some careful editing before uploading it to our resource center. So quick run through for today. So as Laurie said, this is our second session. Today we're going to be looking at markets and the economic outlook, and we have Ian Leslie from Marsh covering that. Following that, we have David Swan on cyber intelligence. David is a real genuine expert in cyber intelligence and computer security, based in Vulcan. And I'll let you decide later whether that is a small town in Canada or whether it's an entirely different planet. And then we're going to leave some time for an open discussion. We are going to settle into a routine as of next month for running these. We're going to run them on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday of the month. So that means our next meeting will be the 13th of April. And that one is early in the morning, which should make it somewhat easier for our Australian friends to join us. And then later in the month, 27th of April, we run late afternoon in the UK, which should make it easier for the US and Canada to join us. Please do use the chat to ask any questions or leave any feedback or thoughts at any point. And I'll share any notes that come out of this afterwards as well. I'll be sending a link with a quick feedback form at the end of this as well. And that's really important to us to help shape our agendas for these meetings ongoing. So look out for that in the chat towards the end of today's session. So the objectives, I should say, here's my contact details, but you're going to get all of that anyway in the chat shortly. So I won't linger on there. I don't want to waste any of our precious time today. So the objectives of these meetings are to cover off the many different risks that we as business owners and risk managers face as a result of the conflict in Ukraine. In our first session, we focused upon sanctions. Today, we're looking at cyber risk and some elements of accounts and finance, but I anticipate we will come back to further elements on that in future meetings. Our next meeting, we're going to be looking at payments and supply chain. But these are just my ideas as to what the risks are. If you think differently, then let me know, and I'll be more than happy to add your areas of concern to our overall list of topics. Obviously, since our first session 2 weeks ago, sanctions have moved on. There have been another set of sanctions that have come out of the UK and EU, and I imagine the US as well. So I also anticipate that we'll do a recap on the sanctions in the not too distant future as well to kind of catch up on those important changes. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Ian Leslie at Marsh. And Ian is going to share his screen, so I'm going to stop sharing for the moment. Welcome to the floor, Ian.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And hello to everyone on here. For those of you that don't know me, and I see some familiar faces, obviously I can only see a certain number, but certainly some familiar ones there. So my name is Ian Leslie. I head up sales and business development at Marsh, working in their trade credit area.
Floor is yours, David.
Very slight correction, Darren, and thank you for the gracious invitation. I'm going to talk about the cyber warfare between Russia and Ukraine, and then project at the end its impact on the rest of us. The Russians have been, can I tell you when to bring up the slide? We'll use it a little later in the presentation.
Okay.
Thanks. The Russians started to look hard at the internet back in the 1990s, and researchers who had access to Russian academic and military strategists noted that in about 1996, the Russians began to plan and figure out their doctrine, how the internet could be used, what they could do with it. And the result was they built themselves a complete doctrinal approach, how to use and integrate cyber warfare in with conventional military forces and use it as a lever when they went to war or when they wanted to punish another country, but not use sanctions or military force or something that the world does not condone. The doctrinal approach out of Russia is, first, you tap government websites, you interrupt government communications, you touch banks because if you can crash a bank or block access to a bank, you interrupt the other, your target nation's economics, crash gas stations, crash infrastructure, usually meaning telecommunications. And the recipients of this doctrine have been Estonia, Latvia, South Georgia, and to an extent, Ukraine in the 2014 invasion of Crimea. So we've seen the Russian doctrinal approach. We know what it is. And this year when, 3.5 weeks ago, when they went into Ukraine, it's not what we saw. What the Russians didn't allow for was the number of Ukrainians in the ranks. And surprise, surprise, they had some defections. They had people who leaked malware and then published decryptors so that functionally they got detected and they got pushed back, pushed out. Different groups had different bad things happen to them, but for the first week, Russian cyber forces were largely ineffective. The other part of that formula is on the Ukrainian side, or from the Ukrainian perspective, they were ready. They had a decentralized internet. They had many internet providers who had practiced against getting attacked from Russia, and they've been attacking and working on their systems since the 2014 invasion of Crimea. So they were very prepared. And overall, as a country, not Estonia, but relatively robust defensive preparations. So the first week of the war for Russia ended rather badly. Week 2, Russia reconstituted their forces. And Darren, now if you could show everyone slide number 3, please. What does reconstitute their forces mean? Well, no, that's Ukrainian forces. Excellent. Russia has, most notably, their foreign security unit, the old KGB, has their own hackers, and not one or two. We are talking about 10 to a dozen major teams that work together, highly trained, very professional, and capable of really making a mess of things. Likewise, the military has their own intelligence organ that has another equivalent number of teams, highly trained, highly capable. Russia has also done some other things. They have specifically hired one cyber criminal group who are known as mercenaries. They haven't been identified well enough to be given a name yet. Very professional, identifiable through their tight operational security and their capability. Just sort of the ultimate top tier hackers. There are a number of cyber criminal groups that have links to Russian government and the state security. Notable amongst them is the Conti Ransomware group. They've gone to work for Russia. We don't know if they're being paid or what the exact relationship is, but they're definitely working for Mother Russia. And they have some pretty significant capabilities, especially when it comes to attacking the financial markets and amplifying damage done to infrastructure. Down at the bottom of the pile, we have the patriotic hackers and just the criminals who think Russia is a great place to hide. Relatively low risk. The problem is they add chaos. So they're problematic for us. Next slide, please, Darren. So not Ukrainian cyber forces. What I'm getting to is, what are those forces doing based on their actions? 3 things. The Russian forces are trying to knock the Ukrainian internet offline if possible, and do things like block the Ukrainian president's speeches and presentations he's giving to other governments. Not a lot of success there yet. Why? Again, decentralized Ukrainian internet setup, good solid defenses. Disruption of Ukrainian government organizations and Ukrainian companies? No, not so much. Identify and disrupt social media influencers. Well, Russian social media influencers have been largely identified and to a surprising extent discredited, and some of the biggest have been blocked. So they're having a tough go of it. Now, that takes us to where we currently are in the conflict. Next slide, please, Darren. Here's what the Ukrainians have. They started the war with a small cyber unit that was part of their communications establishment. Very highly trained, very military targeting. Find the bad guys, identify where they are, geolocate them, feed that data to their artillery, to their combat forces on the ground. Very effective. Ukraine also put out a call for volunteers and civilian hackers and responded extremely quickly, set up ad hoc command and control via the Telegram messaging application. And they're not talking about what these people are doing. That said, I firmly believe that the assassination of 5 Russian generals and 15 sub-commanders comes because whenever these guys talk on cell phones or they use social media applications or they try and get their word out, they're being located, identified, and then that data is being passed to the Ukrainian army. The call for volunteers has also led to people doing social media work on their own. They're saying they phone family members and they phone other people in Russia and they try and tell them what's really going on. The feedback on that is it's largely unproductive. The surprise for me was the resurrection of the hacking group Anonymous. And I say surprise for me because I thought they'd largely disbanded and become defunct. However, a wave of volunteers and some technically quite capable volunteers, they've been inside a number of Russian government departments. They've hacked corporate networks. They are now starting to routinely and casually dump data about Russian companies and what Russian government departments have ordered. How much they can do is an unknown, but they are certainly as competent as the criminal groups working for the Russians. Last but not least, there are elements of Ukrainian hacker groups who've walked away from their criminal groups because they were pro-Russia or doing nothing and have gone to work. And they're another wild card in the mix. So that's the two sides, and that's the attitude they're taking. Notice the Ukrainians are focused on Russia. Russia is not just focused on Ukraine. Right now, Russia is focused on the close battle in Ukraine. However, it would be wrong to underestimate the strategic brain that Russia shows as a matter of routine. We forget that Russia is a land that produces mathematicians, composers, strategic thinkers, great writers. So my forecast was that when Putin or his strategic brain trust get their head up, they really have 3 options of what they can do in the longer term with their cyber forces. The best case scenario for the West is that the exodus of Ukrainian leadership leaves them in chaos and they never fully recover. Well, that's come and gone. We're not going to be that lucky. The second option, and the most likely scenario, is that not only will Russian forces reconstitute, but Putin has been advertising severe consequences for the West. Well, he can't do that militarily because that will provoke a NATO reaction, which he doesn't want. He wants Russia to endure and be restored to its golden age, whatever he considers that to be. But since no nation has ever been called out for using cyber tools and cyber warfare, that's an easy go-to option for the Russians. So the most possible scenario in my mind is that Russian cyber forces will launch global attacks as consequences for nations who opposed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So the G7 nations who have stood up, and that includes the UK, that includes the United States, certainly includes Canada, will become prime targets. The worst case scenario is that Putin picks one nation to be made an example of and goes there. I say worst case example because if he concentrates his cyber forces and he does things like purchase access to corporate and government networks from the criminal world, which he certainly has access to, he can turn off the lights, literally. turn off the electricity in countries. Certainly in a country like Canada with a lot of long distance transmission is fairly easy. I don't know how easy it would be to do that in the UK. I do know that it's an issue in the United States. Turning off oil and gas pipelines, turning off critical infrastructure, all viable, all doable. At this point, I think the most likely scenario remains that it will be a generalized attack, probably on critical infrastructure, against the countries that vigorously protested the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Darren, and I'm open for questions.
Yeah, I've done the whole mute error just now. So yeah, something that I saw in the press a couple of days ago, the US are advising US companies and citizens to no longer use Kaspersky as their tool for antivirus and the like. Do you think that's just smearing of a well-respected Russian company, or is there a genuine concern there?
First of all, the founder of Kaspersky was a KGB officer, and I just simply don't believe that the KGB is ever going to let one of their own off the hook if it's perceived that Mother Russia has a need to access or to leverage the antivirus software. I don't see the KGB ever doing that. I served in the Canadian military for 37 years and I spent more time working against Russians than I did training with Americans, which is remarkable when you come to think of it. I just, there's a certain consistency to the way the Russians do business. And especially in a time of conflict, I just don't see Kaspersky getting let off the hook. So, yeah, no, I think that's a very legitimate precaution.
Okay.
David, can I ask you a question about the capability of the West then to cyber attack Russia in full force and what the impact of that might be? So it seems to me you've described how Russia has certain talents to be able to do all this and cause havoc, but can't the West also cause havoc on Russia equally, if not worse?
Yes, we can. However, generally speaking, we don't do business the same way. The United States has really been the font and the breeding place for many hackers and criminal groups based on both wealth, on mismanagement, and on the love of rebels and the love of criminal groups, as shown by Hollywood. It's really counterproductive. The NSA and to a certain extent, both your GCHQ and Canada's National Security or CSE, Communication Security Establishment, are particularly gifted hacking organizations, to put it crudely. Yes, they could get inside Russia. Yes, they could do a lot of damage, but we don't tend to go in and turn off other people's lights. Russia does. We don't tend to do things that would cause pain and grief to the population at large. It's just how we play the game differently, and it's more of a cultural thing.
Yeah.
Could we? Yes. Should we? That's a political question. I'm not going there. And I don't think we would. I don't think the politicians would let it happen. That's an assessment on my part.
Cool. Thanks, David.
Well, being, I think, the only American on this right now, and also having done some work with DoD, yeah, we have got very good capabilities. And to some extent, do you think Russia hesitates doing a massive cyber attack on the United States, sort of it has a deterrent effect? They know that we could shut down the country from here if they were to try that. Do you think? And that's why I would anticipate more sort of discrete attacks, especially on Western countries other than the United States, knowing the capability the U.S. can do to the Russian cyber system.
William, I'm going to disagree in that what started with one Russian military group turned into an international phenomenon called the SolarWinds attack. And Russia has no compunction about going in and turning our infrastructure off. And I can say that because they've done it to other countries. Would they do it to the United States? There'd be more thought before they did it, but they are much more likely to do it than we are. And I think Putin's a nasty enough player that if he wanted to make the point of this is a line that I don't want crossed, yes, he would do it.
Well, we might not do it as a first strike, but just as, from what I hear and see, if that were to be attempted on the U.S., there would be a lot of Muscovites stuck in subways.
I agree. Not arguing that point, but I am saying that I think Putin is capable of starting that fight. There'd be more thought about it than a Balkan neighbor, but I think Putin is capable of thinking that way. And bear in mind that the Colonial Pipeline shutdown was caused by a Russian ransomware group that undoubtedly is paying some form of tax or tithe to Putin. Colonial Pipeline rolled out of Russia, so we've already tasted that potential.
If I may, speaking of ransomware, just weeks before the invasion of Ukraine, Russian authorities arrested, I think it was 14 folks in the Revil ransomware group. And I think that's probably sent a message to the Conti group. But then the Conti group had some Ukrainians who defected, who now established Conti leaks. And that's given us some insight into how Conti works.
Yes, it has, but it's also interesting. The Revil arrests didn't even take all of the corporate headquarters down, and the middle managers and the operational controllers all remained in place and were back up and running. I can't remember if it was 5 days or 7 days later. It was remarkably ineffective at taking down Revil. So,
but do you think they were trying to send a message?
I think they were trying to temporarily appease the United States.
Thank you.
The points that you made about power infrastructure in the UK and how susceptible the UK might be. My opinion on this is that our electricity infrastructure in particular is constantly running at near capacity, and it wouldn't take very much in terms of also switching high power units on and off rapidly to cause a problem. That's just my view on that.
Actually, I believe it was Oxford was part of a multi-university simulation and war game a number of years ago, and what they looked at as the basis for a cyber attack rolling out of Russia was to not turn things on and off, but to simply take some generators and tune them out of phase, which causes other generators to go out of phase. And what happens is you end up destroying the generators. And that took, in that particular war game, it took down the American Northeast right into the American Midwest, and from the Canadian border almost to Mexico. And it put 350, 400 million Americans in the dark, and a lot of Canada. So the application to your comment is, don't have to turn things on or off. You just have to find a weak access point to one generator and take it out of phase, and it will it can create a domino effect, a cascade event, and actually knock much larger and other generators offline permanently.
Okay, thank you so much, David. I'm kind of conscious of time in so much that we schedule these to be an hour. We are going to allow everyone to stay on and kind of ask more questions if you have the time to stick with us. But just before I open the floor to general questions, I just wanted to update you on a couple of things. So the next meeting, we're going to be covering David, because your chair is very loud. We are going to cover supply chain risk and payment challenges in our next meeting. But again, a reminder to give us some feedback. I'll pop the link to the feedback form in just a moment. Also, since the last meeting, we have launched our resource center for the Spotlight on Ukraine series of meetings that we're running. So do pop over to the website and have a look at this. I am personally adding stuff to this on an almost daily basis. We have some good content there from a number of partners. David produces some regular cyber intelligence updates, which we also post up onto there as well. So do have a look on that. And if you have anything that you'd like to contribute as well, I can't guarantee a rapid response at the moment because we are getting a lot of requests, but I shall endeavour to help spread any useful resources to the wider community for the good of us all. We are also offering some discounts at the moment. The two forums that Forums International run that are most closely aligned to a lot of the issues that we're discussing is the International Credit Forum. And if you'd like to join that forum, we're offering a 10% discount. And also the Fraud Prevention Network, which I chair. Again, a 10% discount for that forum. Next month, I'm also running a couple of workshops in London. If anyone would like to attend these workshops, then pop me a note and I'll make sure that you have access to discounted delegate passes for those as well. And finally, through our partners at CICM, we can also offer discounted membership to the CICM. And if that's of interest to anyone, then do let us know. So that's the formal bit done. Our next meeting is on the 13th of April at 9:30 British summertime. So we are going to have a clock switch before our next meeting. Registration is open already, so if you want to register yourselves, then you're welcome to do so straight away. And that is all that I wanted to say before opening us up to general discussion. Laurie, is there anything else that you'd like to add? You're muted, Laurie.
So I was just letting somebody in. Actually, they're an hour late. So just to say, Brendan, are you still on, or have you gone? Brendan gone?
Looks like he's disappeared.
I think he's gone. Oh, okay, fine. All right. No, I think just perhaps next time we just want to we need to just perhaps encourage a bit more. I'll leave a bit more time for discussion, I think. So
yeah, I think we need to reduce the sessions to 15 minutes rather than 20.
But certainly both the presentations were really interesting. So thank you very much for that. So and we'll make those available to everybody, all those who want them. So.
Okay, I am going to post the link to the feedback form. So if everyone could provide their feedback when they exit this meeting, we'll be most grateful. Although we have hit our just gone over the hour, if anyone does want to stick around for a little while longer, we have this open and available for a bit longer. So happy to discuss anything or everything.